Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today I have with me Cory Byrd. Cory, what's happening with you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm blessed. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks for accepting the invitation, man. I've been seeing some you moving and shaking online, man, and so I wanted to make sure to bring you on to talk about that a little more, and just to really serve as a mutual benefactor for both of us to promote what I'm doing as far as this message that God has given me to help people understand what their genius is, and to also just promote what you're doing. And I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to say the name of it just yet. But with the endeavors, with the initiatives that I've seen you start within the past 6 months, over the summer, I believe is when everything started popping off. So that being said, the workshop and the book have the same title that I'm working with here is Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. And it gets into this idea, this concept of genius. And so with that, Cory, I want to ask you, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
It's interesting you will bring that up because a young lady said this on Facebook, called me a genius, and an artist genius. And I thought that was like a big compliment to me because I personally don't consider myself a genius. I just consider myself an artist. I've been given the talent that God has given me, and I do the best I can with it. I try to grow with it. I try to study other artists that I'm influenced by and try to implement that into what I create. So I necessarily wouldn't categorize myself as a genius. I would just say I'm an artist just like anybody else.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So there's something interesting that's evolved, or something that has been revealed in the time that I've been doing these interviews. I've been doing them since March, I believe. And by and large, everyone says no. And that's fine, because that lets me know that God gave me a message that is relevant and has an audience base. But the few that would say, two things are interesting. The few that would say, yeah, I'm a genius, one, they were artists. You got to be your biggest number one fan when you dare to put something so personal as your artistry out there for the world to consume, for the world to judge. And so before people start throwing darts, you got to be like, you know what though? Like, I am this though. So that when people try and tear you down, at least they get you back to like base and don't take you somewhere lower than what you need to be.
Yeah.
The few people that have said yes are artists. The other people who say yes, typically when I ask my follow-up question and I say, who comes to mind when you think of this word genius? Because it's who comes to mind for most of us that then allows us or disallows us to say that, hey, I'm a genius too. The ones that said I'm a genius were the ones who identified like their parents as geniuses, or identified somebody that looked like them that they could relate to. So for us being minority men, if a minority, and I started off really focusing on guys, because a lot of times we struggle with issues and we feel like we don't talk about them enough. And I wanted to just uplift us, because I know I go through my peaks and valleys just like anybody else. And I want to pull some other people out that may have been going through some things. And so for Black men to be able to say like, hey, I identify this person as being genius, but I also identify with this person, then now you have a closer relatability to be like, well, maybe I can tap into that too. So those are the two interesting things that I noticed from those who said yes. But for the most part, like I said, for the most part, most people are like, nope, not me. Because there's a humility about it, right? But the one thing that I hope that we can talk through today is humility. Most of the time, we only focus on the one spectrum of humility, which is to not think too highly of yourself. Other side is to not think too lowly of yourself either, because Cory, you were made in the image and likeness of God, and this, you were fearfully and wonderfully made, and this your soul knoweth right well, right? So what the world calls genius, the Bible calls over in 1 Corinthians 2:16, the mind of Christ. And so we'll get into that a little bit too. But let me get to this second question that I kind of alluded to. I'm gonna say it explicitly. Cory, who comes to mind for you when you hear this word genius?
First person comes to my mind is Einstein. that's like the first thing that comes to mind. A scientist or anything. I don't know. I kind of see like people outside of the arts more geniuses than I see. And it's, I guess it's different spectrums or different, categories can go into that word of genius. But that is the first person that comes to mind is Albert Einstein.
So you said some important things right there. You said there's different spectrums. Mm-hmm. What's the other word that you used?
Categories.
There's different spectrums and categories to genius. That's the main takeaway of the next 45 to 60 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And Einstein is the number one answer. Mm-hmm. But Einstein, because he's the number one answer, Cory, he's the number one problem. Because I don't look like Einstein. I don't got his hair. I don't got his nose. I don't got nothing.
Yeah.
So if somewhere along the way in school or in society and in the community, we've accepted this idea, this image that Einstein represents genius, mm-hmm. and not to take anything away from him, because he absolutely is or was a genius. Mm-hmm. But when we fail to realize that there's different spectrums of genius, then when we see him, we disassociate genius from ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, yeah, Einstein's a genius, but I don't know nothing about the theory of relativity. I could care less about E equals MC squared. Yes, it's white light. I can see the light, but that's beyond me. I don't care. So yeah, he's a genius. I'm not. Move on. That's the way most of us think. And it's so subtle, Cory, because it's not like anyone ever came to you and told you that he was a genius. It's not like someone sat you down in class and said he's a genius. There's some things that we just kind of get through osmosis. Yeah. And we kind of just got programmed with this idea. And so I'm here to kind of mess with that programming a little bit. Like I said, I'm not trying to take away anything from Einstein, but what I am here to say is what you've already indicated, is that he's just one type.
Yeah. Right.
You're in the arts field. There are plenty of genius artists out there that don't take anything away from what Einstein has done, because it's just two different categories. Right. So let me pause there for a second, because I got to make sure that I don't talk too much in this interview, because I'm interviewing you. Yeah. So how do you feel about that? How's that hitting you?
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really does, because as you asked the question, I thought about that, but that was the first person that came in my mind, because as you said, it's kind of been implemented into our heads to see that as him as a genius, because we've been kind of told that. It's been shown in movies, it's been shown in cartoons, it's been shown in all kinds of ways where that's what we think is the staple of a genius is, and the bar in which a genius should be. And so I never associated the arts with a genius. I mean, you got Pablo Picasso, and you got many other different artists, Monet and everything like that. But I've never really looked at them as genius. I just think they are creative people. They're creative artists. And I guess the word genius has always been put towards the science or math and everything more than it has been towards the arts. Even with music, you look at people like, Jimi Hendrix or any other of those, artists, the Beatles and everything like that. You could look at them as music geniuses, but it's a different type of genius. And now that I think about it, you could probably look at like artists like Pablo Picasso and, artists like that are geniuses, because what truly is the definition of that word genius, exactly. And it could go towards different spectrums, as we talked about.
So we talking about Einstein. So this is coming up in my mind. It's all relative.
Yeah.
It's all relative, right? Because it's like, okay, if you were to try and judge Einstein by what Jimi Hendrix does, would you call him a genius still? Like, nah, he's not a genius in the same manner that Hendrix is a genius, but it doesn't take away from that title that he, deservedly has. Neither it takes away from neither of them. You know what comes to mind too as we think about artists and science? Leonardo da Vinci. I know we was geeking out about the Ninja Turtles before we. Leonardo da Vinci represents the best of both of those worlds, right? Because he was a gifted I mean, inventor, but everything that he invented and sketched, he sketched it himself.
Yeah, right.
Right. So
Right.
that's just something that popped into my head. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I have a quote that I want to tell you to help progress the conversation. And it's interesting because the interwebs would tell me that that Einstein, this is a quote from Einstein, but I remember I posted it recently on Facebook and I got fact checked, like, hey, this might not be. And I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. It doesn't even matter whether it's Einstein or not. The concept is a powerful one. Okay. And it
Mhm,
reinforces what we've been saying. So
mhm.
I'm gonna read it. Well, I don't have to read it, I'm gonna say it. And I just
Okay.
want you to do two things. Just react to them. Hey, have you heard this before? And
Mhm,
then two, like how do you internalize it? What is it saying? All
mhm.
right.
Okay. Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Here we go. If you judge a fish by how well it could climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Mm, mm. That's interesting. Yeah, because a fish wouldn't, the fish is out of the water and trying to do something that is usually not in that habitat to do.
No,
So of
sir.
course it's going to think it's stupid, to do it because it's not what he's familiar with.
It's not what he was made and designed to do.
Right.
And
Right.
so this is a powerful quote to me because it really exemplifies it turns from a quote to a metaphor now for genius to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, like you said, God designed fish to specifically swim.
Yeah.
And they have fins, gills, scales. They are streamlined for the water.
Hmm.
So genius is about what have you been designed to do? What's your element? What's your lane? You know, somebody tell you if you start operating like, man, stay in your lane though, right? And
Yeah.
so we got to figure out what our lane is as we're coming along and finding out who we are and what we're meant to do, what our purpose is, right? And
Hmm.
so finding our lane is I'm gonna allow the three components that God gave me to define or redefine genius to help you find your lane, right? Those
Hmm.
three components are passion, talent, and purpose. Okay.
Hmm.
Because the interesting thing about this metaphor now is, you know, everybody is from planet Earth, as far as you know, right? We're not into
Yeah.
some world invasion or nothing like that, right?
Some you get a question.
Everybody knows when you see a fish that it belongs in the water.
Yeah.
And you would you would do well to judge a fish accordingly. And if you saw a fish out of water, you're like, oh man, somebody about to have a fish fry or something.
Yeah.
All for the earth. If you see a fish flopping around in the water, I mean outside of the water, you're like, yo, something's about to happen. It's about to die,
Yeah.
right? Because you know that it's not designed. I don't know. Like I know that the past 24 months has been interesting. We've seen some things that we've never seen before in our lifetime. But Cory, I'm telling you, if I see a fish climbing a tree, if I look outside right now and I see a fish in the tree, I'm getting off the planet. It's like physics has gone, something
It's
is
done.
about, and it's time to find a new earth. Right?
Yeah.
It's time to get raptured, something, because that's not natural,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so genius, as God has given it to me, is about finding what's natural, what's your natural environment that allows you to thrive as God designed you to thrive, right?
Hmm.
It takes a lot of us a long time. I mean, you and I both worked at the same institution for a great many years, and we were able to bring. I believe if I we haven't had that many conversations, but knowing you and seeing your post on Facebook, the place that we worked might not be where we were supposed to be, but we still allowed the light of God to shine through and touch people in a way that allowed them to be successful, allowed them to get information that they needed and go about their way to get into their own right and be successful. So there's something about being a child of God that allows you to be successful wherever you are. But
Hmm.
about operating on the inside of what the Bible calls the mind of Christ that
Hmm.
gets you to the next level, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so this is about leveling up, Cory,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
So as I think about it, um, Einstein, he's a bear, so he's supposed to be climbing trees,
Hmm.
right? And when you have this tree and you have this, I always envision this fish has been I imagine if a fish could stay out of water for days at a time,
Hmm.
technically there are some fish that can do that, but we know what, we're not going to get into that right now.
Right.
Mud skippers or something, but whatever. If this fish was able to stay out of water long enough and continually try to climb this tree, I feel like there are some things that this quote is not saying that are happening to this fish. I feel like day after day, somebody's coming and checking in on this fish, and it's like, have you climbed this tree yet?
Hmm.
Have you gotten up the tree yet? No? Okay, I'll check on you tomorrow. And then, of course, this fish is sentient. It begins to process this, like something must be wrong with me because this person is telling me that I need to climb this tree. I
Hmm.
don't, this doesn't feel natural to me, but this person keeps reinforcing every day that I should have climbed this tree by now. And
Hmm.
so that person represents a system that a lot of us end up working on the inside of or being impacted by, that begins to tell us, like it begins to try and make us fit into the system versus finding what the right system for us to be successful in.
Hmm.
All right. So we're going to talk about systems a little later. All right.
Okay.
So let me just pause for a second. You still with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. Now I want to get into the first component of this equation.
Okay.
And that first component is passion. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm gonna do some word association again. So I asked you what came to mind or who came to mind when you thought about genius. You told me Einstein. I'm gonna do the same thing with this word passion. What
Okay.
words come to mind when you hear passion?
Christ.
Yeah, okay, passion of the Christ.
I mean, his passion to save humanity pushed him through the pain, pushed him through, you know, uh, what was happening to him.
Oh, it's good, Cory.
So that way his purpose will be fulfilled as the
Absolutely.
Son of God, And so my I, on my personal level, that word means the same thing. Going through the pain, going through the hardship to get to the purpose and goal in
Okay.
which God has given you. God has given me an artistic goal,
Mm-hmm.
to be an artist. And there's been times that I'm in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, Lord, take this cup away from me. I don't know if I can do this. And God has definitely put in my mind and my heart. And when I have those doubts, he'll bring something in. Somebody will say something or somebody will post something on Facebook that points directly at that. And that's how I know that God wants me to do this.
Yeah,
He wants me to do this passion that I have. And he helps grow that in your heart to push forward.
absolutely.
And I believe that's what Jesus went through too. As God incarnate, he still had the Father push him forward, help him push him forward, strengthen him to go through that. And I feel like God does that with me as well, in many ways, not just with art, but with life in general.
Facts. I love this, man. Like every time, this is why I love doing these individual workshops, because normally it's 25, 30 people upwards, whatever, and I don't get a chance to have this much in-depth conversation, and it makes each interaction unique. And I'm going to hang our hat on Christ right now, because what you're saying is so powerful. Like because Christ fulfilled his purpose, it helps us fulfill ours.
Yes.
And that's what real genius does.
Mm-hmm.
It first he had to know who he was. People were saying he was Isaiah and reincarnation of his cousin and all manner of stuff. But he was like, nope, I am the son of God, right? I know who I am. And
Mm-hmm.
because I know who I am, now I can impact the lives of others because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to accept the labels that you're putting on me to make your world make sense. And that's exactly what genius is about, right? Because it's about self-affirmation, but then it doesn't stay focused on you. You're like, now that I know
Well,
what I have, now I
yeah.
want to go out and see how I can impact the world around me for the better, right? Because
Yep.
that's what put us on this
Uh,
planet to do.
and that's exactly what God's done through my art, is that people are seeing what I'm doing. And even though I'm pushing forward by myself to create this, people are seeing it as an inspiration for them to create
Yes,
and
sir.
for them to move forward. And people have told me that, said that you are a big inspiration for me because I see what you're doing. And you're raising a family, you got kids, you got a full-time job, but yet you still are doing this. It help fuel them. And it was so wonderful to hear that I gave that inspiration. I'm sorry to cut you off. But that was a great point that you were making, is that it does go out, that passion shows. It's that light that shows to other people to be inspired as well.
Yes, sir. So that's one of the reasons
Sorry,
why.
it's my cat. He wants to be part of the conversation.
Right, he sure does. That is one of the reasons why, even a couple of years ago, when I started, publishing my own books and my children's books, it was to give people an example that they could follow. Because I'm like, look, I ain't no different from you.
Right.
I got the same. I put my pants on one leg at a time. I got children, the young kids, trying to make life make sense, going and commuting and going to work. And I'm like, but if I can do this, and you have an idea in your head for a book, for a manuscript, you can make it happen. And that example is important, because people need. We were talking earlier. People don't ascribe themselves genius to themselves because they don't see somebody that looks like them that's operating in it. I can never do that. I can never amount to that. So this whole thing of being an example is important.
Right.
So getting back to passion, there's a book that I read by Mike Murdoch called The Assignment. And in that book, very short book, but it's a powerful book that forever changed my idea of passion. Because in that book, I like what you said thus far. A lot of people, love is to passion what Einstein is to genius. When people start thinking about passion and I ask them, they think love. That's the first thing that comes to their mind. And ironically, there is a relationship to love, but this dude, Mike Murdoch, said, hey, look, if you want to figure out what you're destined to do, you need to find out what you're passionate about. But what you're passionate about is the thing that you hate, though. And I was like, oh, snap. Like, what is this guy saying? So, I continue reading this book. It's called The Assignment. He said, if you want to figure out what your God-given assignment is, figure out what it is that you hate. And essentially what he's saying is, you would agree that the world is broken, right? I mean, there's not fish in the trees yet, but but the world is broken. You would agree, yes?
Absolutely.
We know that the thing that broke it is sin.
Yep.
Right. It's running rampant. And and there are some things, though, that some brokenness that impacts you personally that doesn't impact me, and vice versa. There's some things that brokenness, when it touches me, it traumatizes me. And I'm like, ooh, like I don't like how that made me feel. I don't like the trauma that I now have as a result of this brokenness. And eventually your language gets stronger. You're like, I hate that. When you see it operating long enough, as you get older, and you remember how it made you feel when you were whenever it impacted you. Most of the time, stuff happens to us in childhood that we carry throughout our adulthood. But when we see it operating, and then when we see it begin to touch other people in a negative way, we're like, I hate it. But we start to say something. We start to ask questions, Cory. And the main question that we ask is, man, somebody should do something about that.
Yeah. Yep.
We start looking around like, hey, can somebody do? And so what Mike Murdoch is saying here, look, if you find yourself saying that often enough, then guess who the person is supposed to fix it?
The person, me, yeah.
And what he called it, though, it's funny. He called it your Popeye moment. And so, you're one of the few people you could understand this reference, because we came up in the era. Popeye had this moment where he's like, I had all I can stand. I can't stand for into his skin tight shirt and pull out this big thing of spinach. And you knew it was a wrap. You knew that whoever it was, which most of the time, whatever the circumstance was that was on top of him, he was about to be on top of it. Matter of fact, I got something I got to remind me off camera. I got something to show you that's hilarious. I got to say this on camera. I'm sorry. I watched this thing just yesterday, and I thought about you, where it was Street Fighter setting, but it had all these like random characters in it. So they had like Popeye versus Ryu. They had Donald Duck. Donald Duck was overpowered, bro. Like he was undefeated when he could get into his Donald Duck rage. And I was looking at this thing like, this is sharp though. Like, who came up with this, and why is it working so well? Like, Donald Duck was wrecking Ryu. And then they had like Popeye, they had Captain Caveman. He would fly out, he would go to Captain. All right, I'm sorry. I gotta send it to you. You would appreciate that. Anyways.
Of course I would.
Your Popeye moment. What is it that when it impacts you, like, you know what? I've reached my limit. I'm about to just go off, right? because he's saying that that thing that's in your heart that you react to the world against, God put it in your heart. But the thing that angers you, the thing that you hate, is the thing that he hates. And he put us on the planet because he hates sin, and he made us in his image and likeness to do something about the sin that was in the earth. He gave us the Garden of Eden. We messed that up. We're supposed to advance that and have it take over the planet and then restore order to the planet. We messed that up. And Jesus came and gave us the model, gave us the example, restored our authority to begin this process all over again. But the thing is, Cory, the world remains broken because everybody is looking like, well, somebody else got to do something about it. I don't have anything to offer. Hey, man, they're the genius. Look, you know what's interesting? All the geniuses that get mentioned, most of them are dead.
Yeah.
So it's like if they're the only ones that can impact society, then we in trouble because they're gone.
Yeah.
We have to begin to empower ourselves through Christ, because we can do all things through Christ, which strengthens us, right? So we can begin to address the issues that impacted us and are impacting other people. Well, he's like, if you can zone in on that, now it's a David Goliath type circumstance. Because the thing that you're going to identify is never going to be something small, Cory. It's going to be something large.
Big,
systems come in place.
Yeah.
It's going to be a system that's operating against you. And you're like, I don't like that. I feel like I don't count now. I feel like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
And I need to do something about it. So I'm going to pause for a second right there. Then I'm going to pick back up and talk about David and Goliath. How are you processing that?
I mean, as soon as you said that, like what you hate, I thought about racism and prejudice.
Yep.
I absolutely despise that because I feel like I know that God made us all of us, you know, and nobody should be hating each other just because of their ethnicity, color, any of that, because we're all human and all made in God's image. And God loves variety. So he made a variety of different people. And for us to hate another person because of their, you know, race or ethnicity is to hate God and hate his creation.
It is. Yep.
And, you know, and people who, and I also hate hypocrisy. I also think that people who say they love Jesus, they love Christ, they go to church, they do this, they bump the Bible, but then turn around and hate somebody else of a different color, then you're missing the point of what God created.
Absolutely. I don't even want to, you're going to get me off on another tangent, man. I really on the block on Street Fighter and get into that. I don't even want to pick that up, but I feel you though. I completely feel you. It pains my heart. The things that I've encountered, and I'm gonna go here, since Trump got in office, the people who I saw as brothers and sisters, the people who I saw as allies, when they came out of their mouth with this support for Trump, I just couldn't. I'm like, geez, are we ever going to be agreed? Can we ever not be separated by politics, by something? Because I mean, this seemed like a no-brainer to me. You don't see the character of this man. And so now I'm looking at them like, okay, now I have to, Lord Jesus, please help me understand with my brothers and sisters, now that I've seen that we have something else that divides us, that is not as easily surmountable as race. Right. So again, that's a whole nother thing. So I'll get back on track.
But I feel you because I went through the same exact thing. I went through the same exact thing, brothers. And I'm still, I mean, that's when love really comes in. That's when the testament of God's love really comes in, because at that point, you gotta, the Bible says that we will hate one another, we'll betray each other and everything like that. And I think politics and racism plays a big part into what God is saying in that, what Jesus is saying in that. And I feel you, because it was a struggle, it was a fight to really love people who they became enemies. They became from brothers to enemies in a split of a second. And it was like, oh my gosh, what Bible are you reading? You know what I'm saying? And
what eyes are you using?
Like what eyes are you using? What Bible are you studying? Where are you getting this from? Are you blind? And so it's like, I really had to really look at God's love and forgiveness at that point. And I think that's another passion, to be honest. it becomes another passion, because you really have to be what Jesus did. People betrayed Jesus. He even said on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do. I had to say, Father, forgive Trump supporters, for they do not know what they're doing. And that had to change and I still get angry. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I still get angry about it, but it helped me get past the anger to go into, like, what Star Wars says, fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. And so I had to bring in the love to cut that off.
Yeah.
From going to hate. And that's only God can do that.
I see what you're doing out there, because I think you and I said this to you a while ago. I was like, you and I have a lot in common. I was like, we should be talking, right? Yeah. Because what I see you do is the same thing that I do on Facebook, I believe. I feel like I've been called, because I have a couple things that I hate, and I hear you saying that too. But I feel like one thing that I've been called to do is to show my neighbors and show my brothers and sisters in Christ that have a little less melanin than me, that, though I'm your neighbor, though I'm in what could be considered a good community, a good neighborhood, our philosophies don't line up.
No.
I need you to see the hypocrisy and what it is that you're embracing. You're embracing two things that are showing you. I mean, all of us are made to be hypocrites at some point in our life.
Yeah. We all do. Yeah.
And it's a moment to repent. It's a moment to change your thinking and get your mind renewed. And there's a lot of renewing that has to take place. So I'll post a lot of things that challenge people to consider, like, oh, okay, I never really thought of it from that perspective before. And, Reggie, I thought your life was, you're one of the good ones. Your life is good, isn't it? Like, no, there are some inherent traits and inherent things that I have a problem with how this country operates. Mm-hmm. It's not all good for me, because, I have a child, I have a son that I got to raise. Anyways, this is all stemming off of the hypocrisy that you stated, right?
Yeah.
So David and Goliath, I told you I would go there. See, it's a lot of little rabbit holes and places that this can go, but that's cool.
Yeah.
When we tap into this thing, we won't care how little we are compared to this thing. We won't care how big this thing is compared to us. My wife said one time, she didn't make this phrase up, but she was like, how do you eat an elephant? And I was like, what? She was like, one piece at a time. So once you target your enemy, you really won't care how big it is, because you're like, you know what? I got to do something. You mentioned fuel earlier, and one of my past guests said that passion is like the fuel in your tank. Once your tank is filled up, you are off or up. You are moving forward toward, you're not falling back. You're not scared of it. You're like, I'm running towards this thing, and I'm going to lop this thing's head off. You're going to be like David, because David was seeing the people's reaction to Goliath, and he was like, y'all been how long out here? 40 days. Been hearing this dude talk trash for 40 days against our God, though? Like, who is this uncircumcised dog? You know what? Let me get at him.
Yeah.
That righteous indignation got boiled up in him, and he was like, I'm gonna do something about this right now. I'm tired of this. I just got on the scene and I'm tired. Y'all older than me, it doesn't matter. I know the God that I serve. I've been killing lions and bears, protecting my father's sheep. I can get at this thing. And so you know what happened. The giant fell and his head got cut off. And this is how we have to address our passion, the things that, and that's why, it's very important also. We got to be careful, because when I talk to kids, I'm like, tell me what you hate, not who. We got to get away from names on it, because like you said, like this, we all have this commonality, right? So it's what is operating behind a person that causes them to act the way they act, or people to act the way they act. Let's get at that though. Not against flesh and blood, but against what? Principalities, the rules of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. And the weapons of our warfare is not carnal, but mighty through God to the putting down the strongholds, right? So we've identified our giant. You've identified your giant. You said hypocrisy, I heard. And then what was the first thing you said?
Racism.
Said racism. All right.
Racism.
Got it. So when the next part of David's story gets interesting, because Saul looked at him and said, hey, take my armor. And that was a misjudgment on Saul's part. That was somebody coming and saying, hey, you climb this tree yet? And David knew right away, because David said, no, don't give me that. Like, Can you see? I'm a child. Can't fit the armor. You'll get me killed in a minute if I go out there in this armor that's not built and designed for me. She's like, give me my slingshot though. That's what I've been killing lions and bears with. Let me get that though. And these 5 smooth stones. And of course, people looking at him like, what? What are you? But they learned that day, didn't they? So that slingshot and those 5 smooth stones represent talent. God-given talent. He's giving you something very specific to help you address and take out the thing that you're passionate about, the thing that you hate, right? And if you think about it even a little further, if you think about Moses, sometimes we overlook our talent, right? Because it's so common to us that we're just like, oh, that's just that. Moses did that. When Moses was talking back to God, like, you want me to do what now? You made these lips. I stutter, right? Don't worry about it, man. You want to meet your brother. And that wasn't enough for Moses. He's still talking trash, like, I'm the wrong one. You sent the wrong one. And then God was just like, okay, man, what is that in your hand? He's like, that's just my staff. It's my rod. He's like, toss it on the ground. You know what happened. He tossed it on the ground.
Turns to a serpent.
He touched it by the tail. It turned back into a rod. He was just like, now go. It was what was in his hand. God is always looking like, what do you already possess? You don't have to get something new to address this passion that you have. Just look at what I've already given you. And so my question to you, Cory, is like, it's clear. And at this point, I think it's cool to release the name of what you're doing, but what is your talent?
Oh, I mean, storytelling, visual storytelling is my biggest talent. I'm able to tell stories through visuals without words. The words are in my head, but I can transform that into imagery and tell a story through those imagery without even having words.
Yes, sir.
Because that's how I visualize. Like with my books, with Tooth and Nail, I don't write a script. I go right in and I just draw the pages based on my visuals in my head, and then I add the dialogue on top of that. Or in the 3rd issue, my son helped write the first 13 pages.
Nice.
Of it, and to be honest, I felt very constrained by that. And this is not the first time I've drawn to a script before. I've drawn to scripts before, but my creativity is very constrained from drawing from a script. Yeah. If it's my story, obviously, if it's my story, that I can do it, but I don't like it. It's not comfortable for me.
Yeah.
My talent is to be able to visually tell it on the page, and it gives a cohesive, a story that makes sense and flows from the visuals. And that's the way I operate, and that's the talent that God has given me, to be able to be a visual storyteller. Okay,
so that's so great that you can be that specific about it, though. A lot of people don't know what their talent is, and I'll touch on that a little later, hopefully. But what I'm hearing I watched something about Marvel recently, and I saw that some of the editors operated the same way you operate, and they were coming up with these amazing stories, but then they tried to switch the model and have a script that then dictated the drawings, and it stumbled. It was like, we can't. You gotta let us do this the other way around. Yeah, and it was not conventional.
Yeah, totally unconventional.
But once they figured, like, okay, they'll thrive this way, then they eventually changed. But there was a little bit of problems for a little bit with Marvel.
But anyway, and that's let me cut you off for a second. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And that's something, I actually learned that from another artist. I don't know if you ever seen Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Castle in the Sky. It's done by a Japanese artist named, I don't remember his first name, but his last name is Miyazaki.
Okay.
And one day I was reading, I love his work. I love his animations and everything like that. And I was watching one of the movies called Spirited Away. I definitely recommend them. They're very beautiful, very well animated. I read that he didn't do it with a script. And that blew my mind. I was like, what? How do you come up with an animation without a script?
Right.
How do you come up with the story? And I just read that he draws everything out first, and then when he brings it to film, then they write the story according to his artwork. And I'm just like, I can do that.
Yeah.
It literally changed my artistic life. And that's how I work now. That's the only way I work.
Sometimes all it takes is one. Like, you can do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
That's genius, though. His genius, you saw his genius and said, that's it.
Yep.
But the thing about God is he very much works through impartations.
Mm-hmm.
Impartations can come by the laying on of hands, or they can come by just the fact of witnessing the testimony of somebody. Like, oh, that happened in your life, that can happen for me too, right? The testimony of Jesus Christ being the spirit of prophecy, right? And so they very much, and I'm already hearing the Lord say that, this component, this talent that you have is actually very much prophetic, because prophetic is all about the vision. It's about edification, exhortation, and comfort. But back in the day, the prophets were called seers.
Yeah.
And, he talks about dreams and visions.
Yep.
And so this gift is very much a prophetic gift that you have. I don't know if you ever connected the two before, but
I never did.
Yeah, I see it as clear as day. You're literally seeing something that's not there and bringing it to pass. Even as God spoke words to bring everything into existence, you're bringing things into it. You're bringing a world into existence to reflect, what good artistry does is it pulls you in with the visuals and then tells a story that draws parallels to the real world.
Yep.
You're like, oh, snap. So I'm already getting into what I feel like your genius is. I don't know if you've addressed this in any of your issues, because you're on like issue 4 now. Yeah.
I'm working on 5. I'm 5 pages into 5, but issue 4 is the last one that's been completed.
Yeah. And so here's how I see. I'm a jump to the last component. We're in talent. You nailed your talent. There's no like trying to figure out what your talent is. You know what it is.
Yeah.
Your purpose in life is to be like David, to pick up your talent and realize that it's your tool to go at, to address, to attack the thing that you hate, which is your passion.
Mm-hmm.
Once you begin doing that, you're unlocking your genius. And so what I see you being able to do with Tooth and Nail is to bring an illustration of what hypocrisy and racism looks like through the visual representation of your artistry. So that, because sometimes horror movies are good for creating the manifestation of an evil into a physical character, so it embodies like a thing. And you're like, that thing is ugly, it's horrendous. And it's like, yeah, that represents racism. You're like, oh, snap. And now you've gotten somebody, because you're already invested in the story. Now you can help people change their mind and repent, because when they see the correlation, and sometimes they're not going to see it themselves, you have to actually come out and tell them. Like my told a story the other day, and at the end of it, like I read it and I'm like, that's a great story. And he was like, yeah, did you pick up on the fact that this is what I'm really saying though? And I'm like, no, but you need to put that at the end of the story. I said, don't put it at the beginning. You got to let people feel
it in
the world and internalize it for themselves.
Yep.
And then say, this is the message though. And then they can't help but then internalize it more, and then transform and hopefully change their thinking about what it need to be true or not.
Yep. That's excellent.
Best artists do that.
Mm-hmm.
Best storytellers do that.
Yep.
Draw you into a world. We know Christian artists have done that. Tolkien and Lewis created entire worlds, and at the end was like, Aslan represented Christ though. Oh, snap. Like, I gotta go back and read it again. Like, oh my gosh, like it was there the whole time. All these components, right? Yep. And so I see what you're doing as the manifestation of that. When you begin now, if you begin, because it's your choice, but if you begin to say, you know what, though, I'm going to begin weaving in some stories that deal with racism, that deal with hypocrisy, and show like the nasty beast that they are, and how my main characters have to interact with it and fight tooth and nail against it to bring about balance to the world, to bring about justice to the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's interesting you would say that, because back in my mind was never to interpret any kind of message with what I was doing with Tooth and Nail. But it kind of, now that you bring it up, it does play a little bit into that, because in my book is the cats versus the rats. In my book is called The Neko Are the Cats and the Rats Are the rattle. And so the rattle wants to destroy the Neko because they believe the world belongs to them and it was created for them. But the Neko are just trying to live their lives, and they're just trying to protect their village. Yeah. But there's an unforeseen darkness behind what's going on with the rattle that nobody knows anything about, but it's actually a plan behind it, like a darkness behind it. There's also a light behind it that's kind of protecting and guiding everything without being a manifestation for anything yet. Yeah. So it does play into that. I mean, the creation of Tooth and Nail, like the origin of it, does have a lot of Christian origins to it, but I'm trying not to be too upfront about it.
Right.
Yeah, overwhelming with it, but it is there. Underneath it is really there. And I'm not trying to be preachy or anything like that. It's a story that just kind of like evolved from that. It evolved from many things, many different things in my life that kind of goes into that. And now that you brought that up, that it does kind of play into that balance. When you said the balance thing, I was like, my first book, yeah, it comes up. I think it says, in the world of Tooth and Nail, a darkness looms over the presence of light. The peaceful inhabitants of the Neko village is under attack. The barbaric rattle are on a mission to end the existence of the Neko. However, 4 heroic warriors push back. Jade, the leader, Sapphire, the humble swords master, Onyx, the timid, and Destiny, the mysterious, work together to end the invasion of their home. Trained by their master Geen, they learn important lessons to overcome their differences in order to fight as one. Mm-hmm. And so it does play into that, getting together with different type of people to fight one overwhelming evil.
Absolutely. Because then when I'm thinking about the images that I've seen, I'm like, yeah, one is a cat and one is a rat, though. Like, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense because they're the bridge. Oh man, it's already there. I love it. See, God is so slick with his stuff, man. Because sometimes he's just like, hey, look, just be obedient to what I've called you to do. You'll figure out the rest of it later. Like you'll see it later. Just be obedient with what I told you to do, right?
Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing about it is that I feel like I need to just give you some affirmation. When I first started trying to do workshops and going through U46, I was told, like, the name of my business was Manu Forti Ministries. Manu Forti means with a strong hand. Mm-hmm. And the guy who I pitched it to, he was like, look, I see what you're doing, but you can't come in here with Manu Forti Ministries. And I was like, I kind of knew that, but I was trying to be bold, right? I was trying to be like David. And he was like, you got to change the name. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to compromise. Mm. But then the Lord told me clear as day. He was like, be as gentle, be as wise as serpents, but as gentle as doves. Yeah. I was like, oh, now I get it. And I see that's what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. You're using in your execution to not drive people away. And the Lord is with that, though. He's like, yeah, we need, this is why, what you're doing, you're using parables. That's what Jesus did. Like, okay, let me make this make sense to you in your language that doesn't scare you off, but leave processing what it is that I've said, and it's a seed that's been planted that'll mature as somebody else waters and God provides the increase. And I see Tooth and Nail as being something that is a seed planter that through the lifestyle that people live, there's going to be some watering, and then God's going to provide the increase to give them a change of heart, a change of mind, and understand the world better that's around them and bring about this balance that we kind of alluded to.
And also in the back of Tooth and Nail, the first issue and the last issue I just did, I give glory to God. I don't hold that back, and I'm selling it to the public, and it's in the back. So like when they're reading through, after they've read the fluff per se, they'll get to like, I take this seriously as a spiritual walk that I have with God and what he has shown me do my creative senses, not to be, I went to school for evangelism leadership at Wheaton. I got my master's from that. So I know how to talk to people and make relation without being, in your face. You got to accept Christ. You got to accept Christ. you got to be loving and accepting of people first, and God will do the rest through that. And so what I do with tooth and nail, I don't hold back my spirituality and what I believe in with God and everything, but I'm also telling a fun story. I'm trying to tell a fun story. I'm showing all my influences from Ninja Turtles, from Naruto, and all the things that I grew up with and really enjoy, but also have my spiritual sense in there that I'm not trying to push on anybody. I'm saying that's where my heart is, and that's why I create what I create.
Yeah, and see, this is why you on the show, man. Because I was like, this is this guy's genius right here. I can sense it, man. Because like one of the things that God has assigned me to do, because I see people's genius as this fish out of water, I see dying genius all around me, and I feel like it's my mission. One of my missions to revitalize, resuscitate, and rejuvenate and resurrect the genius that's around me, because it's everywhere. It's everyone. Whether you say I don't see my talent, well, it's generational, right? God has been trying to do a thing with your family for generations. The resources haven't been the same. The timing hasn't been right. The belief system hasn't been flourishing enough, and now something is manifesting in the present generation, the talent, because it's been placed in us from long ago. Like none of it is our own. And the parable of the talent, like you are called, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. You have been ruler over many, and you are ruler over many when you multiply the talent that he's given you, right? And he revealed to me a while ago, because I've been talking about this parable for so long, but then I asked this question recently. I was like, well, I know what my talent is, but how do I multiply my talent though? And he was like, by making other people that are wordsmiths, because I'm a wordsmith. Like a vision smith, right? I'm a wordsmith. He was like, multiply other wordsmiths so that they know where this talent comes from, and they begin to operate how I designed them to. And I'm like, oh, okay. And to me, the visual that I'm getting is, you remember Man of Steel when they had like this key, and it wouldn't go into it would go into this place, and it went going, and it was just like a couple degrees off, and so it's turned it to the right degree, it went right in. And that's the unlocking of the genius, right? Just to help people see, like, you've been walking in this, you just didn't know. So having said that, I do want to end the interview the same way I started, which is just to ask you, Cory, consider yourself to be a genius.
I still struggle with that.
It's all right.
I still struggle with being called that, because I still have that implemented in my head, that a genius is up here. I still have that in my head, and I will have to think about that. And really explore what that really means. And that's why it took me back when a young lady called me an artistic genius, because I was like, artistic genius, that's too much to me. I thanked her, but I felt like that was too much for me to be called that. But after this interview, I see that genius is not necessarily like all the way up here, but it's something that we all have in us that we have to discover and use for God's glory.
Absolutely.
In the end,
it's common to all of us, right? And so the thing of it is, did you watch Lightyear, this movie that just came out?
No, I haven't seen it yet. No.
Okay. There's a quote in it where the main character, someone has been telling him about himself, because he goes through this area where I'm not going to, it's no spoilers.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Every character goes through this place where they doubt themselves. And so this character, like Buzz Lightyear, doubted himself, and someone in the movie saw something in him and spoke to it. And to honor this person, he was like, hey, look, this person saw this in me, so I started looking for it too. And sometimes God will speak to us through other people, and that person that came to you and said, I don't know how long ago that was, but for that person to have said that, and you to be sitting here right now talking about
that's
genius,
crazy. That's God. That's God.
Yeah, he's like, hey, look, I need you to see this though. Like, you have the mind of Christ. Because you wouldn't deny that though. That sounds, it's because of the stigma. There's a lot of stigma with this word genius, right? Because if you began to tell yourself that you weren't a genius for whatever reason that you told yourself, those reasons probably are still true. So you're like, well, that's still true about me. So how can the things that disqualified me from being genius still be true while I accept being a genius?
Sorry.
Oh, that's all the cat.
Oh, cats.
And so it's at least you got, I see where you get your models from. You can
Yeah.
But yeah, it's understanding. It's very much an unlearning that has to happen. And hopefully we've done it in a way that's gentle enough so that you don't feel like, I'm not saying that you have to leave. We're not getting off the line until you say you're a genius, Cory. No, that's not what this is, right? But it's just planting the seed for you to begin to consider, like, okay, wait a minute though. Like there's some, I have to redefine this word. And genius is not about knowing everything. I think that's one of
Yeah.
the things we think of. It's about high. My GPA wasn't high enough, and that was one type. Genius that I'm talking about is non-academic, has nothing to do with IQ, has nothing to do with GPA. It has to do with you being a part actually of the body of Christ. Because if we go back to what I said, what the world calls genius, the Bible calls the mind of Christ. And if we know over in 1 Corinthians 12, it talks about the many-membered body of Christ.
Yeah.
And the eye can't say to the hand, I have no need of you. The body works in concert.
Mm-hmm.
And if one part of the body isn't operating, then the whole body is out of whack. If my toe starts malfunctioning, my balance is off. If we go back to balance, if I only have 4 fingers that are operating and one of them is asleep and I try to grab something, I'm gonna struggle. And so you are one of the members of the body of Christ. And if you don't see how you integrate, how you work with the rest of the body, then the body is off. And not just you, all of us, right?
Yeah.
The connection that we all have is that each of the members of the body has a connection to the mind of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's how, if the mind of Christ, and now I'm just going to talk about biology, if our brain doesn't communicate with one part of our body, then something's off and we're not going to be able to function as we were designed.
Right.
Something's cut off. The communication is two-way, but the brain operates and functions to talk to my toe just as much as the toe communicates to the brain when it stumps something. And
right.
Like, don't hit that again. Hey, go look at that. That hurt. Right?
Yeah.
And so getting beyond what hurt us, getting beyond the communication of the trauma that we experienced with this word, now we're being restored, getting our minds renewed to say, hey, look, I'm a part of the body. I have a role to play. I have functionality. My function does not look like somebody else's functionality, but it's just as important.
Right.
And it's important because it's connected to the mind of Christ, what the world calls genius.
Okay. That's definitely something to think about.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not going to hold you hostage until you confess it. But I just wanted to say, man, I just see it. I see it in you. And I wanted to speak to it so that you can begin to explore it for yourself. And believe me, like your tooth and nail was going to do what it was going to do, whether we had this conversation or not. But I do feel like the trajectory of it, that key just got turned a little bit to be able to insert it even further than you initially even thought. Just continue to be obedient to what the Lord has put on the inside of you. He told me a while ago that when we use the gift that he's given us, that's a form of obedience. And you have been obedient.
Yeah. I feel that because I feel like every time I want to give up, God sends me a message to say, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And it pushes me to go keep going. I actually got something just recently. Somebody posted on Facebook just recently that like hit me like a bad truck that was like exactly what I need to hear in my life right now.
Okay.
And he does that all the time. And that's why he's the word, because he sends the word.
Mm-hmm.
It's so many different ways to so many different people you don't even expect it to come through.
Yep.
And what you might say about fake, like people might say about social media. Yeah, social media can be used for evil, but God can use it for good. And he has used it for good.
Yeah. Somebody is supposed to take this over and be like, you know what? We individually can begin to, I almost gave up on social media for a little bit, but then God was like, well, if you leave, you're a change agent. If you leave, you're going to leave it to his own devices and it will be evil. Yep. I need you to keep putting stuff out there that is like the leaven in the lump. And just keep it so that it rises. And you have the same calling.
Yep. It's another means of communication.
Yes.
It's another means of communication. Yeah, there's a lot of junk out there, but it's a lot of junk out here too. Yep. No matter what, you're gonna get junk because we live in a world of sin. But we got to live in the word of God's light to shine that through whatever medium we possibly can.
Oh, snap. You know, you just made me think of,
But
now you got me thinking of the Planet of Junk and the Matrix of Leadership and the light shining and like the whole other place. Like, what if Transformers was a complete metaphor for it? Nah, I'm not going to. Be ye transformed.
It could be.
But look, man, like I said, we could geek out all day. I feel like I've accomplished my point, and just to highlight what you're doing and to let you know that what you're doing is genius. I see it as that. I believe God sees it as that as well. And look, you know, I just want to thank you for taking the time to let me talk to you for a little bit, man.
Yeah, it was great. I'm really glad we had this talk. I'm glad, you can connect. I know we see each other's posts on Facebook. We haven't had any face-to-face time. Technically, this, it is, but it's not. Yeah. But you are where you are, and God bless your family and everything. I'm really glad that you're doing this, because it's needed in this world. We really need people to reach out and show the love and let people see what they're capable of, and see what God can do through that. And I believe maybe I am a genius.
Okay. All right. Hey, that's what's up, man. Well, check it. This has been Manu Forti Ministries. I'm your host, motivational speaker, publisher, author, Reggie Key. And this has been my genius guest, Cory Byrd, with the Bird's Eye View. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Hey, stay on for a little bit after we finish off. I just want to say a couple other things to you.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.